Hi, I'm Lance. Welcome to SHL Fireside Chat. Renee, how you doing?
Pretty good. How are you today, Lance?
Doing really well. Excited to have our guest. We got Kate Bischoff, an employment lawyer and consultant. Really excited. We'll get into that in just a moment. But as a reminder, my name is Lance Andrews, background in industrial and organizational psychology and an assessment consultant. And Renee, you want to give a quick intro for yourself?
Sure. Also an industrial organizational psychologist, working mostly on the selection side. Happy to be here to talk with y'all again this week.
Yeah, so this whole forum is really to connect professionals that are dealing with talent and talent-related issues in this new COVID-19 world. And our first guest here is Kate Bischoff. And Kate has a really impressive resume. So with an interesting background ranging from, we went to law school, you were a practicing attorney, including at a very big employment law firm. Spent some time as an HR practitioner, and currently, I don't know if I have time to, I have a crib sheet here to look at, listing all the things that you've got your hands in, but you've got your own consulting firm, so your own law and consulting services firm, Thrive Law and Consulting.
Yes.
You're the co-host of the Hostile Work Environment podcast, the new co-host, which I highly recommend. It's a good podcast.
Thank you.
A guest speaker, adjunct law professor of HR compliance. I personally recommend your Twitter feed.
Thank you.
Active blogger, new contributor to ERE, and so much more. So, Kate, I'll let you give yourself an introduction, but welcome and thank you for joining us here today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, I normally introduce myself as someone who suffers from law degree, but I try not to be the stereotypical lawyer. I don't own a suit. I don't go to the courtroom anymore. I spend my time working with employers to do better. So about a third of what I do is kind of training based, where it's respectful workplace or manager training. Another third is helping them write policies and procedures so that they can do things in a particularly compliant way that hopefully doesn't just smell like compliance all the time. Hopefully it has this kind of human first kind of aspect to it. And then the last third I do is workplace investigations. So I'll have a client get an accusation of harassment. I'll go do an investigation and find out what happened and then make recommendations from there. So all three of those buckets kind of feed each other, and it's super fun. I would not change a thing about my job. So.
Well, great. I've enjoyed getting to know you through the virtual forums that we connect in, and nice to meet you in person.
Yes.
Just to start, and I'll just kind of jump right in because I was actually reading today, you had a new blog posted on ERE, and it's very timely related to something that we're actually dealing with a lot of our customers on, and how, what is changing and what can employers do and what can't they do with the new environment and things that are happening these days. So if you can kind of maybe summarize some of the things that you're seeing.
So because we are in a declared pandemic, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, has kind of become much more lenient about how they treat disability law in particular. Right now, an employer can withdraw a job offer if the candidate has COVID. They can take employee temperatures at the start of the day. They can ask about medical information that they normally wouldn't be able to ask about because we're in this pandemic setting and because we're trying to reduce the spread of COVID-19. At some point that will end. And will we be able to turn off those things that we've had in the workplace now? So, Dr. Fauci was out there this weekend mentioning that there might be immunity certifications. So our recruiters and employers going to be asking for, can I see your immunity certification? Were you exposed to COVID-19? Do you have the antibodies? Have you been vaccinated? All of those questions normally would be prohibited under the Americans with Disabilities Act. But is that going to translate post-pandemic? Are we still going to be able to ask those questions? I'm hoping not. I'm hoping that we get to a point where we say you can't ask those questions anymore because they lead to disability discrimination, they lead to age discrimination for those high-risk groups, et cetera.
So when officially does ADA go back into effect? When does that, what's the trigger there?
So I have a favorite emoji right now. It's this emoji. It's, I don't know. There isn't I haven't seen clear guidance from the EEOC of when this necessarily will end, but at some point it will end, whether it is 18 months from now, whether it is 9 months from now, I don't know. But at some point, the protections that exist in the ADA have to be turned back on. And I fear that they won't be turned back on. I fear that if I am an applicant who is 60 years old or 63 years old and I'm looking for a job at Walmart or something, the response to that is, you're in that high risk group, so I'm not going to hire you. And I fear that we're going to create this environment where it makes it easier because, well, we don't want them to have COVID, so we're going to be more protective, and that kind of paternalistic piece just leads to discrimination and harassment.
So right now, it sounds like people can ask if you have had COVID or currently have it, or can they continue down that path to ask about lots of other pre-existing conditions that would just predispose you to have potentially a worse outcome if you were to contract the virus?
Yeah, I think potentially you can ask about asthma and diabetes, the pre-existing conditions that put you at more risk for the potential for death under COVID-19. I see that you could be able to ask those questions right now because we're looking from a pandemic perspective, that we don't want you to expose you to these risks. But we also can't say, oh, you current employee, I'm going to fire you or I'm going to furlough you because you have asthma and I want to protect you. Like, that is still disability discrimination on the employee end and while employee relations, while they are an employee. Are we still going to be able to do that for applicants is my concern.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just the muddying of the waters, even if we try to course back, like that just feels like it's going to be a nightmare to retrain folks and to get everybody back on the same page, even about what you're supposed to be doing, much less kind of like the will and enthusiasm for doing whatever that is.
Right. I think we've been thrown into this very, very quickly of, we have to change how we do things because now we're trying to reduce the spread, but we're going to change back just as quickly. It's the desire and the will to be able to do that second change, I think, is going to lead to my kids being able to pay for college. I think my mortgage is going to be okay. So I think there's going to be a lot of concern and discussion and training that needs to happen around this. And not only, I think the only real true benefit here is to those people who spend our time already doing those kinds of trainings, which, is laughable, but we are going to have to get back and train again so that we're doing the right thing by employees.
So, and just in general, what are some of the things your clients are asking you as employers? What are the whether it's with respect to the FFCRA or anything related to the ADA?
Well, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act has been the bane of my client's existence for the past 4 weeks. So ever since we've got notification of it, that could be coming, that really has been an area where requiring paid sick leave, requiring expanded FMLA, that has been something that we've been talking about constantly. But that's only for employers under 500. The other piece of it is this disability discrimination. I've got an employee who is significantly at risk, is very afraid. We're seeing big changes in the economy. So can we furlough people? Should we be furloughing people? Do they get unemployment? Should we keep them on benefits? All of those kinds of questions are kind of constant at this point in time. Slowing down a little bit because I think we have a better sense, and we've got this new paycheck protection loans that are helping keep people on the rolls for a bit, but there is just a lot of uncertainty out there, and that just means that there are a lot of questions, and I'm trying to be as helpful as I can at this point in time.
Yeah. Do you have any clients who actually are in a place where they're hiring right now and trying to figure out how to do that? Like, what are you seeing and hearing? We have a few in that place, and we're kind of seeing the logistical kind of I-O process side of that, but I think you're probably getting a different set of questions.
Yeah, I'm getting, because I have a law degree, I'm getting a lot of compliance questions. So like if we're hiring and we're going to have a remote workforce, what does that look like for just doing an I-9, right? Like I have to physically look at the document, but now I'm not physically with them. Do I do a Zoom call and they show me their passport? Like, what does that look like? There's a lot of questions around if the manager has never seen this person in real life, and trying to get around those trust issues about, well, I think they're a good fit, but I've never met them. So are they going to do a good job for me? So a lot of those kind of trust issues are coming up because we're so virtual. I think some of that will change as we get more used to it. I think organizations that were already doing a lot of remote work were much better positioned to be in this kind of situation. But like, for example, Mark and I do a podcast, the Hostile Work Environment podcast. Mark and I have never met in person. And so, you know, we're able to do it. So maybe other people can do it.
Yeah, so I guess organizations are probably just making shifts not only for now, but potentially for the long term too. The nature of work, we've been speculating, obviously we don't know, but does this fundamentally change the way that organizations even consider jobs and locations that may open up jobs that were previously unavailable for virtual work too? There's probably a whole set of considerations around compliance and enforcement there too.
Right, and data security is going to be a big one, because if I'm doing phone calls over Zoom that are not encrypted, you know, or I'm sharing things over unsecured lines, or she's running through her neighbor's, you know, Wi-Fi in order to do the work, like all of those things are going to be concerns as well. And does that mean then that companies are paying their employees Wi-Fi bills? Does it mean that we have VPNs for everybody, and sometimes those are tricky and they're not always going to work? Or are we even going to have conferences anymore? Are folks ever going to meet in real life? All of those kinds of things are up in the air, and they're going to change how we do work, which, you know, not a super hot take, but I'm kind of excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, and we're all kind of eagerly awaiting for, you know, when we can actually start. When will the normal? What is the new normal, and when can that happen? But it is. Yeah, we're all excited for that too. I personally am, I should say. So for the people that are working at home, are there anything with respect to accommodation? So like, not only are people working from home, there's this whole other thing of daycares aren't open, schools are closed, and having to accommodate for either the educational needs or taking care of sick family members. Are you hearing anything? Do you have any thoughts on what organizations can or should do, or what not to do with respect to how allowing employees to work those other things into their work life?
Well, I think organizations need to think like they are Simone Biles. I think they need to think that they are super duper flexible, and then be super duper flexible. I mean, even one of the stodgiest institutions that I regularly deal with, the Department of Labor, bent itself over backwards to say, we are changing our rules around workplace flexibility so that people can take care of their kids during the day, that they can do some homeschooling. So if your employee works from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. and then works again from 10 to noon and then works again from 4 to 8, you count the working hours. You don't count from when they started to when they finished. And so changing these age-old rules around flexibility and trying to entice organizations to get there, I think is really both cool and also, why did it take so long to get here?
Great.
So,
yeah. The other thing I just wondered about in the past couple of days, as we're hearing about potentially like regional groups of states coming together to coordinate what it looks like to, I don't know, open up the economy, return to work, whatever phrase people are using. And it got me wondering, you know, right now it feels like, even if I suppose technically, legally, every state's not doing the same thing, by and large, nationally, we're kind of in the same spot at the same time with what we're doing when it comes to the world of work. As different chunks of states start to be in different places, what kind of chaos or conundrums does that potentially open up for employers who span regions?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this too. So if I have an office in San Francisco and then I have an office in South Dakota, those two things look very different right now, right? Because San Francisco, everybody's working from home. South Dakota does not have a shelter in place. They are moving around quite a bit. And so if we did reopen the economy, you know, that's going to be different for each different location. And that's going to take some finesse on the part of both management and leadership, as well as human resources, to get those folks back up and running. And so I see organizations having to do some sort of, it sounds like succession planning, but kind of rolling of how they're going to build up and thinking about, well, if this region is going to open there, what does that mean for this region? And especially for organizations that have, that make stuff, right? Like we make widget A here, we make widget B here, and then we put them together here in this location. Can we open them all up at the same time, or is one opening up here? Like, that's fun mental gymnastics to think about. But for those organizations that really are in that, I think those are hard decisions to make, especially since, you can't just turn it back on, because you have to have cash to pay payroll. You have to have orders to, subsidize all that. So that kind of thought process is going to be very fascinating, and seeing how we do it. I think there's going to be some that do it really well and some who start and stop because they haven't figured it out yet.
And as you were saying that, I was just thinking, like, the layer on top of that is it sounds like, reading a lot of public health things, that the expectation potentially for more regional actions that follow on, where we'll all kind of come out of this. And then I've seen a lot of public health people talk about the need to be ready if cases flare back up. A particular area, region of some size, will probably shelter back down in place. And so what does it mean for organizations to have different places popping up and moving back down in probably what is a long in-between limbo period between now and whatever the new normal is?
Well, I think for my HR compatriots, I think that means they're drinking more wine. I think, really.
Yeah, and that flexibility you were talking about, you're going to phone biles for a while.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Some Zoom happy hours, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of empathy for folks who are struggling through these decisions right now. We get it. It's super duper hard. You're doing a great job. You're going to make mistakes, and we understand that. And so we're just, for those of us who are consultants to them, we're like, ask me. If you don't remember what the minimum wage is, I'm happy to remind you of what that is. Like, don't bend yourself over backwards, beating yourself up about the silly stuff that you don't remember. I'd rather you come ask me than go, oh my God, I have to look that up, right? Like, it's those easy things that I'd rather help you with to lessen your burden overall.
Yeah. You also trigger something too when you mentioned the state of South Dakota. Kind of got me thinking, and states that don't have shelter in place, and then maybe if we get away from that and there are flare-ups, if there's not a government mandated order, what is the organization's obligation for protecting workers, especially essential workers, where they find an outbreak? Are there any obligations that they have if there's not a shelter in place?
So I get this question a lot, so I'm glad you asked it. Employers have an obligation to provide a healthy and safe workplace, period. COVID-19 has added this whole new layer of, what does that mean? Does that mean that we have masks on now at the office? Does that mean we shut down because we had an outbreak? Does that mean that we all work from home just to be safe, even if we don't have a shelter in place? All of those are questions that my clients are asking. The other thing that they're asking is, what do we have to tell OSHA? And my response in general, and I think OSHA kind of came out and said the same thing, is, don't worry about us, because you're not going to be able to know if James gave it to Susie on the manufacturing floor, because it's out in the community. So we can't tie it directly to this particular workplace. And so I think even OSHA is recognizing that we can't take all of your reports of COVID-19 outbreaks for all of your employees, because we just, one, they don't have the capacity to do the investigations, and two, are they going to find everybody? I don't think that makes any practical sense. So we have this obligation. We should be doing more cleaning. We should be thinking about PPE in general, but I don't think it's something where we have to be entirely sanitized and wearing our Mets baseball team ponchos for a desk job. They have to be reasonable.
Right.
I guess maybe on the employee side, what are flipping it a little bit from what are the employer's obligations? how about the employee rights with requesting accommodations or requesting, more sanitary conditions or paid, unpaid leave?
Well, there's definitely, if I was an employee and I had asthma, okay, having asthma means that I have a huge pre-existing condition that could really get me super sick if I was exposed to COVID-19. I can go say, I need the reasonable accommodation of working from home, or I need you to make sure everybody's wearing masks because I could get really sick here. Those could be considered reasonable accommodations in the workplace, and I, as an employee, am able to ask for those. I'm able to ask for those in any employer over the size of 15 employees, okay? In other states like Minnesota, we get to ask at employee number 1. But you get to make those requests, and you should be making those requests because they're for your safety. The employer has the responsibility then to say, is this a reasonable accommodation, something that we can do? Or if we're not able to do it, what are the possible alternatives to try to make this place more safe? So I encourage employees to make requests for reasonable accommodations, because if we can make things easier and safer for you, we definitely want to do that. We just can't do it without knowledge. We need to know that this is what you need, or we have to have a hunch at least that this is what you need.
I wonder if does that impact applicants' requests for accommodations and just the processes too, you think?
They get the same ability to ask for the request. They don't necessarily get the request that they're requesting, just like an employee, but they get to make those requests too. So if they want to do an interview over Zoom as opposed to being in person, they can make that request. For sure.
Do you think there's anything that starts to come into play that would impact what's reasonable to ask someone to do as part of an assessment or the selection process? And in terms of assessment, the thing that I'm thinking that we're talking to clients about right now is we have some clients who they use something like a simulation type assessment that needs to be done on a desktop. It's a lot. Some people don't have desktops, and so you can't use your smartphone to do it because it doesn't really work that way. But under normal circumstances, you can go to the library. You can, borrow a computer. A lot of companies even say you can come to our particular locations, and you can take the assessment there. With all of those things off the table now, does it shift about what is either reasonable / legally appropriate for someone to be putting in their selection process for people who are hiring?
Well, I think the question is going to be whether or not that's reasonable. Oh, and then on the opposite end of that is that absolutely a business necessity? Is this tool the absolute necessity for us to determine who the best candidate is going to be? And arguably, when we can't do the assessment, then it's not a business necessity, right? Because if you still want to hire, then you're going to not be able to use this.
Yep.
And whoever that developer is, mobile first, right?
Yes. The things that tend to still be a sticking point are things like typing. Like, can how do you? I've actually always had that question. If somebody can, an interesting research study is ability to type on a smartphone correlated with typing ability on a keyboard. To answer the question, could they be substituted for each other?
Oh, that is fascinating. Can they?
I don't know. I haven't done that.
Oh, no, I want to know that because that's fascinating. Well, and see, both of my sons are dyslexic and dysgraphic. So for them, they use voice to text for nearly everything. And so if your assessment tool doesn't have that capability, they're going to really not do well on the typing part of it because they've grown up voice to text. Everything is done that way. So, it brings up a whole host of accommodation and ADA issues if that's going to be your only method of determining the best candidate.
Yeah, total rabbit hole. But you're saying that my daughter's actually dyslexic, dysgraphic, and has ADHD, and it's actually that's one of the crazy benefits that have come out of this homeschooling situation is that we actually activated the text to speech or the speech to text in Google Classroom. And like her teacher was noticing the incredible like increase in the quality of like her written responses. And we happened to have our 504 meeting during this time period. And they're like, okay, when we come back, going into 4th grade, it's going to be an iPad with speech to text in the classroom. And it's funny where these things like where they go and where they come from. And
yes, it has really opened my eyes because I am a verbal and a typing person, right? Like I write for a living in part. And so I went to understood.org to see what being dysgraphic looked like. I'm like, oh my God, that is so hard. But now I understand how great this could possibly be because they're so far ahead on technology than I am because they use it all the time. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Kate, I think we could probably talk to you for hours. I definitely would. I mean, I was thinking having you back to talk about general employment law, especially related to selection, OFCCP issues. So probably topics for another day, but thank you for all you've provided now. I know you have a lot more that you could provide to our viewers and listeners. Where can they get in touch with you and what do you have going on that you can promote yourself here?
Well, they could listen to the Hostile Work Environment podcast. It's very funny, and what people do in the office is hilarious and horrific. They can go to my website, thrivelawconsulting.com, all one word, and find out more about me there.
Yeah, we'll put the link to that information in the video notes, and you can contact Kate there.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Yeah, it was great. Nice meeting you.
Yep.
Bye, Renee.
Everyone.
Bye, Kate. See ya.